The reading for today comes from the second chapter of the book of Ruth. Now Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent man from the family of Elimelech, whose name was Moab. Oh, Boaz. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain, behind someone in whose sight I may find favor." She said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she went. She came and gleaned the fields behind the reapers. As it happened, she came upon a part of a field that belonged to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Just then Boaz came from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers, "May the Lord be with you." They answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his servant, who was in charge of the reapers, "To whom does this young woman belong?" The servant, who was in charge of the reapers, answered, "She is the Moabite who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." She said, "Please let me glean among the sheaves behind the reapers." So she came, and she's been on her feet from early this morning until now, without resting, even for a moment. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter. Do not glean among another field or leave this one, but keep close to the young women. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow behind them. I have ordered the young men not to bother you. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn." Then she fell prostrate. With her face to the ground, she said to them, "Why have I found favor in your sight, that you should take notice of me when I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of her husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and your mother and your native land and came among people you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have found refuge." Then she said, "May I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I am not one of your servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some of this bread and dip your morsel in the sour wine." So she sat beside the reapers, and he heaped up for her some parched grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she got up to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, "Let her glean even among the standing sheaves, and do not reproach her. You must also pull out some handfuls for her from the bundles, and leave them for her to glean, and do not rebuke her." So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. She picked it up and came into town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gleaned. Then she took out and gave her what was left over after she herself had been satisfied. Her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The name of the man with whom I worked today is named Boaz." Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "This man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kinsmen." Then Ruth, the Moabite said, "He even said to me, 'Stay close by my servants until they have finished the harvest.'" Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is better, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, otherwise you might be bothered in the field." So she stayed close to the other women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvests, and she lived with her mother-in-law. When I lived in California, in Berkeley, and I worked in San Francisco, there were times I would take the train and then the bus into work because traffic, and it never really bothered me very much. But it never failed that in the more industrial portions of San Francisco, we would find an older woman with one of those tall standing carts that you would buy if you didn't have a car and you needed to move your groceries from the store to your home. And they would be filled to the very top with grocery bags and garbage bags filled with soda cans. And they would be tied to the outside of the cart. You would see these women checking the garbage cans or looking for more. As they walked down the street, you could hear the crinkle of the bags and the clacking of the cans. And they would wait at the bus stops. And sometimes the bus driver would tell them that they did not want their cans on the bus at all. And other times they would be able to get on, but having to navigate and heave that cart into the bus, navigate it around. Their cart full of bags and cans, so they could get off at the place where they would turn the cans in for money, 10 cents each. And for a while, there was someone even in my neighborhood here in Milwaukee who would come and walk up and down the streets, checking every single recycling bin, the tall ones, looking for cans, collecting them out. And I've wondered about the lives of these women and those folks who would collect them in Milwaukee. Do they really need the money? Were they supplementing an income? Had rent gotten too expensive? Was it difficult to buy the essential things that they needed? Because I can't imagine anyone doing this for a constant income, a consistent income, or for fun. I imagine there are a lot of assumptions made about the folks who collect the cans. That maybe they can't work, or they don't want to work, or they're lazy. And those who think, well, they didn't buy the cans. You're supposed to buy the cans to get the money back. But the reality is there isn't a lot of money in collecting and turning in cans. And what's wrong with collecting the items that others have thrown away as garbage already? Did you know that some restaurants and grocery stores have taken to padlocking their dumpsters to keep those who might go and glean the food that has been thrown out at the end of the day or the end of the week, the stuff that they've decided they couldn't sell? As if the folks pulling things out of dumpsters are trying to get away with free food and not just struggling to survive. They live their lives gleaning for leftovers, for the scraps, for the discarded pieces of lives that others have thrown away. Now, I've had to make some assumptions about our story today. I assume Elimelech had owned property in Bethlehem with which he could live and a field outside of Bethlehem that they would have farmed. But that during the time of famine, as his family prepared to move to Moab and settle up in a new life, they sold all of that to finance their trip. That will become important later in our story. I have no assumptions. I don't know where Naomi and Ruth slept at night. I don't know where Naomi spent her days after she returned to Bethlehem with no husband, no sons, with nothing. And Ruth seems to ask Naomi permission to go glean in the fields because they had nothing and they had to eat. And Naomi seems to sense the direness of their situation and seeing no future and knowing the end is near, still just says, go, whatever. Something I don't have to assume is that Bethlehem, at the time of Jesus' birth, was a small little town. But I assume at the time of the judges, it was likewise. That there were a few families. They were big, they were extended, but a few families that lived in the town of Bethlehem and had their fields outside of it. I assume that a knowing eye would have been able to distinguish one field from another field of who owned each piece. But that for someone like Ruth, who's coming in from the outside, you could probably wander from field to field without really knowing whose field you were in. We meet Boaz in this chapter. And we learn that he has some kind of familial relationship with Elimelech. The first few verses are intentionally vague to leave us wondering and questioning about the role he's about to play. We're building tension in our storytelling. He is a prominent man, a prosperous man. His name is written on a pillar in the temple, as if it were a stained glass window in a church that says, given in honor of Boaz, of the tribe of Ephraim, from the town of Bethlehem. They say he was a valorous man. Perhaps he was a large man. Perhaps he had fought in battles. But a man of what was his probable age and his social status would have been married. We don't know if he is currently married, and it would have been okay and allowed and not totally uncommon if you were able to have more than one wife, to financially care for everyone in your family, to be able to do that. But we also know that it was very dangerous business. One of the most dangerous activities you could participate in the ancient world was being born or giving birth. Perhaps his wife had died. But we know Boaz's eye focused on one woman who was following his laborers, picking up what they left behind. Now, built into the laws of Israel were the care for those who lived on the margins. We looked at this summer when Moses came down and gave the 10 laws, the 10 words, the Decalogue, the 10 commandments that set the covenant between God and God's people. But the laws didn't end there. Found in the writings of Leviticus and Deuteronomy are laws that would establish what the community ought to look like. The laws that would allow for their religious traditions and for their communities, for how they would live together and live well. There are food laws that have been established to keep people healthy and safe. For example, there's a prohibition on shellfish because you have to be very particular in how you cook them to keep them safe. And a lot of people have allergies to them, so maybe somebody reacted and it was just better to not have them. And the reality is that shellfish are basically the cockroaches of the sea, which you're going to remember the next time we talk about the state fair and we talk about the bugs that they're trying to sell to get you to eat, that they are basically just the lobsters of the land. But there are also laws about how to harvest one's fields. When harvesting your fields, you leave the corners and the edges of the fields. You don't take everything you see and collect it. People move. Sometimes the ancient world was unstable and there were refugees. There were famines that made it difficult for someone to stay in their homeland and they would need to travel to another. These laws were built in and put in place for the care of those who had nothing, who were living on the edges in desperate situations, for the immigrant and the widow and the orphan and the foreigner, so that they could collect some food, so they could scrape by. You didn't harvest everything because there was someone coming up behind you who might need it. But Boaz went above and beyond for Ruth. He made sure that she wasn't just having to pick up the leftovers that fell on the ground from the hands of those who were harvesting. Not just the ones that maybe the harvesters decided were not quite good enough to harvest for Boaz or for selling. They were to take what had already been harvested, already been bundled together, and leave some of that for Ruth as well. Boaz made sure she was safe from the men because being a woman in a vulnerable situation, which is a woman without a man, made her life dangerous. Boaz welcomed Ruth into the community, keeping her safe and giving her more than what was expected and more than she could have ever anticipated. So I've wondered about those who have lived on the edges and on the margins. Who are those who are gleaning what is left over? That we make sure they have something, but it's never the best things. I think about our food pantries, about how a call goes out to collect food, and we head to our own pantries and cabinets, and we pick out the things that we bought planning and thinking maybe we would use them, and now months have gone by and we still haven't, but maybe somebody else will figure out what to do with it. And we look at our cans of vegetables that are near expiring, and we didn't use because we bought fresh ones, and we're like, they can have those too. Or those cans of fruit that we're like, this is a good idea, and then we realize they're full of sugar, and we decided, no, this wasn't a good idea. Our food pantries are full of peanut butter. This is important, but they're rarely filled with crackers to eat the peanut butter with. Our food pantries actually serve to support a lot of different things and a lot of different reasons, and our food pantries lack bathroom necessities that aren't covered by SNAP benefits. And we're so concerned about making sure that people are able to meet their basic needs, the absolute minimum, that we don't give sweets or simple cake mixes, because we forget that everyone has a birthday and there are children involved. And children deserve to be celebrated too. What if we, like Boaz, refused to stop at the bare minimum of letting people pick up the scraps, of letting people collect the grain that has haphazardly fallen on the ground, of letting people collect cans from the trash, or be resigned to the expired food we just decided not to eat in our pantries? What if we chose extravagance? What if we chose to go above and beyond? What if we were the people who see somebody far off and say, you are a part of my clan, our tribe, our community, our church, our family, and you are worthy of more than what is just left behind? A decade ago or more, event planner Paige Chenault was pregnant with her first child, and she was so excited. She was looking up all of the parties, the birthday parties she could have for her child, when she came across an article about a child in Haiti in the midst of hurricanes, and this child who was struggling just to get by. And then she thought about all of the other children who may not get to celebrate, and the kinds of parties she was already planning for her unborn child, and she decided to start the Birthday Party Project in 2012. She did so, and she started to throw birthday parties in homeless shelters in Texas, where she was from. And over the last 10 years, it has spread across the country, where every month they would throw parties for the children whose birthday is that month. And they throw huge celebrations, and each kid gets their own birthday cake, and their families can come, and everyone gets to celebrate together. She refuses to let these children have the scraps or the leftover pieces of our world, and tells them that they are valuable and they are worthy and they are welcomed into the party and the celebration, and she's celebrating who they are and the day they were born. Our world is full of people who stand on the edges, who live on the margins, and who hope to glean what they can to just survive. Whether it is food, or it is a celebration, or it is love, or it is welcome. Are we giving what's left over in our pantry at the end of the season, or are we giving people what they need and a chance to celebrate? Is our welcome just going up and saying hello, or is it how we would want our loved ones to be welcomed and brought into community? Can we see those on the edges and the margins as our loved ones too? Maybe it is the work of extravagant welcome and love, the opportunity to keep each other safe in a world that is often unsafe for those who live on the edges. Did you know that our little corner of the world made national news? The Kettle Moraine School Board decided that their policy that prohibits teachers from promoting a particular religion or political ideology decided to include both Black Lives Matter and rainbow imagery, including rainbow flags. Now, what the rainbow flag has done for LGBT young people is to let them know that there is a safe place for them in their schools, that there are safe adults in their midst, and that they are not alone. I will say again and say often that that 40% of LGBT youth seriously consider suicide, and the attempt rates are higher than the national average. And I will do anything to save young people's lives. That is what makes our welcome here so important. As a reminder that no one deserves leftover love, leftover welcome, the scraps of community or support, but are part of God's family and part of this family of Christ already, always, regardless, completely. So, beloveds, may we, like Boaz, give generously. May we love extravagantly. And maybe together, unlike Boaz, we will see more than just one person when we look out across the world. We will see all the people who are scraping to get by. And so maybe together we can create a world where they have more than just the gleaning of scraps. May they have more than enough, more welcome, more love, more abundance. Amen. you.